Welcome back to the new series of Timeline of World History. We have jumped forward 3,300 years from where we last left off in 4000 BC to collaborate with the event series on this YouTube channel that was produced by Fan of History, that is me, that is speaking. With the podcast series finishing in 701 BC, Timeline, which is produced by Serac 002, has decided to carry on the journey from 700 BC. This may or may not affect the podcast. That is for later to know. But the 7th century BC onwards is a very interesting period with a lot more happening than what has been covered in the event series and the podcasts previously. The hope is to eventually get to the 21st century AD, however long that may take. So let us pick off from where the event series left off in 701 BC. If you remember, Sennacherib, the current Assyrian ruler, had decided to lay siege to Jerusalem, as Hezekiah had failed to pay the yearly tribute. Lachish had already been destroyed, and surely the Judean capital Jerusalem would be the next to fall. However, whether by divine intervention, plague the Egyptian army at Pelusium, or being bought off by Hezekiah, Sennacherib failed to take the city and had to retreat back to the Assyrian heartland. Judah is safe, but for how long? Returning to Nineveh, Sennacherib decided to indulge in his favorite pastime, building projects. Earlier on, he had commissioned the renovation of Nineveh, which became his capital instead of his father's previous capital of Dur-Sharukin. On a more personal role, Sennacherib oversaw the construction of parks, gardens and orchards, paying particular attention to his new palace called the Palace Without Rival. The palace itself contained enormous human-headed bull sculptures known as Lamazoo and over 2,000 slabs in 71 rooms. As for the gardens, recent research by British archaeologist Stephanie Daly has suggested that these were the famous Hanging Gardens rather than the well-known one in Babylon constructed by Nebuchadnezzar II in the early 6th century BC. And we already talked about this on the event series. Nebuchadnezzar made no Hanging Garden and it has never been found. Sennacherib took great pleasure of these gardens that he created. However, Sennacherib was soon about to receive news of trouble brewing in the south. Not again! Previously in 703 BC, Sennacherib had placed a trusted Babylonian official called Bel-Ibni on the throne of Babylon after Merodach-Baladan had fled back to Elam. Problem was that Bel-Ibni ruled Babylon incompetently, allowing southern Babylonia to do whatever they wanted, with the result that Merodach-Baladan once again returned from exile to instigate unrest among the Chaldeans and the Elamites. Sennacherib gathered up his army and marched south to confront the treacherous Bel-Ibni, who was soon defeated and carted off to Nineveh, never to be seen again. But what you will see again is me mispronouncing Chaldeans, because they are Chaldeans in my own language. But let's go on. Perhaps they're not actually, I'm not sure. Anyway, what to do with troubles on Babylon now? Sennacherib could have ruled himself like Sargon II did, but he wanted to remain in his new nice city, Nineveh. Therefore, Sennacherib decided to appoint his eldest son, Ashur-nadin-shumi, to the Babylonian throne instead in 700 BC sharp. Once that was done, Sennacherib went in pursuit of the annoying Merodach-Baladan. Time to get rid of him once and for all, except that by the time Sennacherib finally located him, Merodach-Baladan had died of natural causes. Oh well, at least he won't be bothering Sennacherib again, and with his own son on the throne, maybe Sennacherib could be at peace. He thinks so anyway. He's able to return north back to Nineveh to continue working on his palace, without rival, and all the other amazing building projects in Nineveh. Now, what about Judah and its king Hezekiah? Regardless of what actually happened at the siege of Jerusalem, Hezekiah was still the king of Judah, albeit in a weaker position, and that was going to affect his health. The miracle of the unsuccessful siege of Jerusalem occurred around the same time as another miraculous event. 3 days before Sennacherib was forced to leave Jerusalem, Hezekiah fell seriously ill. The prophet Isaiah told him he was about to die, and that the Lord was displeased because Hezekiah had not married. Hezekiah knew that his children would mislead the Jewish people, so he refused to marry. But Isaiah told him that human beings must not interfere with the Lord's way of governing the world. When the king heard this, he turned towards the wall and implored the Lord that he might live. His call was heard, and Isaiah told Hezekiah that Hezekiah would recover and live for another 15 years. When Hezekiah asked for a sign, Isaiah replied that the shadow on the sundial would recede 10 degrees. As it turned out, the sundial did recede 10 degrees. So Isaiah put a fig plaster on Hezekiah's boils, and the king recovered quickly. According to the prophets, Hezekiah had been destined to be the redeemer of the people, who would bring back the 10 exiled tribes of Israel and unite Israel and Judah again under the house of David. But this was forfeited, as Hezekiah was unable to stop himself from scheming again. A delegation from Merodach-Baladan came to Jerusalem to congratulate Hezekiah on his recovery. Hezekiah welcomed the messengers, showing them all the treasures collected in the palace and the temple. However, Isaiah was displeased and told Hezekiah that Hezekiah had committed a sin and that Judah would be on the road to ruin when everything would be carted off to Babylon, albeit not in Hezekiah's lifetime. That's a big fat piece of foreshadowing. As it turned out, the remaining 13 years of Hezekiah's reign was relatively peaceful. In 697 BC, he appointed his 12-year-old son Manasseh as co-regent. Judah started to recover with an abundance of gold, silver, precious oils, and spices flowing in to increase the wealth of the nation. It was located right on top of the trade routes. A nation that was surrounded by tributary states and provinces of the Assyrian Empire, with only Egypt untouched to the southwest. Hezekiah was a pious ruler, but when he died in 687 BC, the old sinful ways of idolatry and polytheism would return with his son. After the death of Merodach-Baladan, and the appointment of Sennacherib's son, Ashur-nadin-shumi, as the ruler of Babylon, relative peace descended upon Mesopotamia, so that Sennacherib could concentrate on embellishing his capital of Nineveh. You could always sense, though, that the Elamites were just waiting to cause trouble, and in 694 BC, the Elamites did just that. Ashur-nadin-shumi was kidnapped. He was kidnapped, causing Sennacherib once more to send an army to recapture Babylon and execute any anti-Assyrian rebels. A Babylonian nobleman, Nergal-Ushezib, became the new king of Babylon because he was such an anti-Assyrian rebel. It wasn't long until Sennacherib was there, retaking the city of Babylon, executing the rebels, although Nergal-Ushezib managed to escape. Good job, Nergal. With no word of the fate of his son, Sennacherib mounted an enormous expedition to invade Elam that included a procurement of Phoenician ships that would sail down the Tigris River. Presumably, they would be disassembled and then reassembled once they reached the Tigris River, rather than make the arduous journey round the trip of Arabia. And we have the accounts of these Phoenician sailors, how they're tricked by the big tides of the Indian Ocean. of the southern waters compared to the Mediterranean. The Phoenicians are taken aback by this because this is a couple of years before the Phoenicians actually circumnavigate Africa, but we'll get back to that. Along the way, Sennacherib destroyed a number of Elamite settlements, causing the Elamite king to act, and I just love this guy's name, as all Elamite kings. He has a wonderful name. He is Halushu in Shushinak. Halushu in Shushinak gathered his forces in 693 BC and marched to meet the Assyrians near the Diyala River. Remember that the Elamites went toe-to-toe with Sargon's troops, but not Sargon himself, and defeated them. So the Elamites, pretty good army. But Sennacherib's inscription at Nineveh describes this battle at the Diyala River in 693 BC. And now, here is my best Sennacherib voice, without any special effects. With the dust of their feet covering the wide heavens like a mighty storm, they drew up in battle array before me on the banks of the Tigris. They blocked my passage and offered battle. I put on my coat of mail, my helmet, emblem of victory, I placed upon my head. My great battle chariot, which brings low the foe, I hurriedly mounted in the anger of my heart. The mighty bow which Asher had given me I seized in my hands. The javelin piercing the life I grasped. I stopped their advance, succeeding in surrounding them. I decimated the enemy host with arrow and spear. All of their bodies I bored through. I cut their throats like lamps, cut off their precious lives as one cuts string. Like the many waters of a storm, I made the contents of their gullets and entrails round down upon the wide earth. My prancing steeds, harnessed for my riding, plunged into the streams of their blood as into a river. The wheels of my war chariot, which brings low the wicked and the evil, were bespattered with filth and blood. With the bodies of their warriors I filled the plain like grass. Then they fled from me, 150,000 of their warriors I cut down with the sword. Well, that's classic Assyrian stuff, although the numbers of warriors killed was probably an exaggeration, as they tended to embellish casualty figures in the ancient world. Still, it was a complete Assyrian victory, and Sennacherib was able once again to return to Nineveh. However, this did not save his son, as Ashur-nadin-shumi was presumably executed by the Elamites. Nor did it prevent southern Babylonia remaining in Chaldean and Elamite hands. Sennacherib decided though to leave Babylonia alone and return to his building projects, and woe to Babylon if they rise again in rebellion. I'll tell you that much. But because of Sennacherib's inaction, Babylon had a new king on the throne. 693 BC, a Chaldean prince, Muchesib-Marduk, succeeded the deposed Nergal-Uchesib, who was captured by the Assyrians following the Battle of the Diyala River. Oh, look at that. Like the previous rulers, Muchesib-Marduk threw in his lot with the Elamites against the Assyrians. Halushu in Shushinak had died in 693 BC. Poor Halushu in Shushinak. The king of Elam is dead. Long live the king. And he was followed by the brief reign of Kutur-Nahunte III. Humbanurmina III, son of Halushu in Shushinak, became the king of Elam in 692 BC. So who was this Kutir-Nahunte III, I wonder? Muchesib-Marduk led the Babylonian populace in revolt against Sennacherib with the support of Elam. Do these Babylonian rulers ever learn? Well, it wasn't long before Sennacherib mobilized his forces again and led the royal Assyrian army southwards. Again, He must be getting fed up, as this was disturbing his building projects. In 691 BC, the two forces clashed at the Battle of Halule. The battle was indecisive, with both sides claiming victory, although the Assyrians did suffer heavy losses. The only outcome was that all three rulers, Sennacherib, Muchesi-Marduk, and Halushu-Inshushinak's son, right, Hambun-Numina III, managed to keep their thrones for the time being. But Babylon was not out of the woods, and in the next episode, Sennacherib will come back with a vengeance and deal with Babylon once and for all, with dire consequences for both Babylon and Sennacherib. So, what was happening elsewhere during the 690s BC? Sometime around 700 BC, we begin to see the emergence of a second Greek poet, who, if he lived, was seen as a complete opposite as a poet and man to Homer. And we haven't talked about Homer yet, because the original plan was to talk about him in the 690s BC. So, please, Sean, talk about Homer. But now we're talking about Hesiod, so let's proceed with that. Hesiod is regarded as the first written poet in Western tradition to regard himself as an individual with an active role to play in his subject. Modern scholars refer to him as a major source on Greek mythology, farming techniques, early economic thought, Greek astronomy, and timekeeping. The dating of Hesiod's life is contested in scholarly circles. However, Hesiod's surviving work comprises didactic poems that went out of his way to let his audience in on a few details of his life. His poem Works and Days states that his father came from Syme, south of the island of Lesbos in Aeolis on the coast of Asia Minor. He crossed the sea to settle at a hamlet called Ascora, near Thespiae in Boeotia, mainland Greece, which Hesiod called a cursed place, cruel in winter, hard in summer, and never ever pleasant. Hesiod owned a small piece of land at the foot of Mount Helicon, which attracted lawsuits from his brother Perses, who seemed to have cheated him of his rightful share thanks to corrupt authorities, but later become impoverished, relying on the help from Hesiod. What a crap brother Hesiod had. Although it seems unusual that his father would migrate from Asia Minor to mainland Greece, the truth is that by 750 BC there was a migration of seagoing merchants taking place from Syme to establish a shared colony with the Euboeans at Cumae, Campania, Italy, and we have talked about the colony at Cumae back in the 750s BC episodes. This family association with Syme might explain Hesiod's familiarity with Eastern myths that was evident in his poems, although the Greek world could have developed their own versions of them at this time. Hesiod's first poem, Theogony, concerned the origin of the world and the birth of the gods, great subject, known as the succession myth. The poem, which runs 1022 lines, starts by describing chaos, empty space then, from which sprang night and day, Gaia. Night and Gaia, earth, Gaia is earth. Next to emerge was Uranus, heaven, who produced many children with Gaia, including the Titans and the Cyclops. Hating his children because they were Titans and Cyclops, Uranus hid them away inside Gaia. Say what? Upset by this, Gaia produced a sickle and encouraged her youngest son Cronus to hide in ambush so that he could strike Uranus at the right moment. Sure enough, when Uranus came to sleep with Gaia, Cronus reached out and castrated his father with the sickle. Ouch. Why are we talking about fairy tales suddenly? But here they are. Okay, we're talking about Hesiod's work, and he is writing this. Alright, good work Hesiod. Let's proceed. Now that Cronus was in charge of the cosmos, he wanted to ensure that he kept control of this power. His parents, prophesied that one of his children would overthrow him. After marrying Rhea, Cronus made sure to swallow Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. When Rhea became pregnant with Zeus, she begged her parents Gaia and Uranus. Yeah, that's the same parents as Cronus had. Incest. To help save Zeus. So Rhea traveled to Crete to bear her son. Gaia raised Zeus deep in a cave beneath the mountain. In the meantime, Rhea wrapped a huge stone in baby's clothes and gave it to Cronus, who thought it was Zeus and swallowed him. Which you do. Although Theogony doesn't explain how Gaia tricked Cronus, the other 5 children emerged back into the world from Cronus' body. Receiving thunderbolts as weapon from the Cyclops, here you go, children. Zeus declared war on the Titans, which lasted 10 years. Finally defeated, the Titans were cast in Tartarus forever. Zeus was elected king of the gods, apportioning various honors among the other gods, including Poseidon, who became god of the ocean, and Hades, who became god of the underworld. Zeus would then go on to father many gods and goddesses, including Athena, Artemis, Persephone, and Apollo, the sun god. The poem itself may have drawn inspiration from Akkadian and Babylonian creation myths, such as the Enuma Elish, which we have talked about, which could have passed to the Greek world as early as the 9th century BC, when the colony of Almina was established in northern Syria, which we also talked about. Hesiod may have learned about world geography from his father's accounts of his own sea voyages as a merchant. His father spoke in the Aeolian, a dialect of Syme, but Hesiod grew up speaking the local Boeotian that belonged to the same dialect group. His second poem, Hesiod's second poem, that is, Works and Days, perhaps his most famous work, was a didactic poem of 800 lines that described the operations of the farmer's working year and the astrologically lucky or unlucky days of the lunar month. Beginning with the invocation to the Muses, the poem describes how Hesiod and his brother Perseus became heir to a farm that was bequeathed to both of them. However, Hesiod berates his brother for squandering his wealth, who wants more than his due share of their inherited land. Perseus bribed the aristocrats to judge in his favor, so Hesiod attacked unjust judges who pocketed bribes whilst they rendered their unfair verdicts. Hesiod thought that instead of giving his brother money or property, it would be better to teach him the virtues of work and impart his wisdom to generate income. This poem then describes the descent of the world from the first golden age under Cronus, when men lived peacefully, to the current Iron Age, which is marked by endless strife. Although human life was noticeably hard, Hesiod believed that human life must be born with dignity, and above all, men must work hard all their lives, like I do with this podcast. He continues to give farming advice. When the Pleiades, Atlas's daughters, start to rise, begin your harvest and plow when they go down. Hesiod discourages Perseus from trying to better his lot by trade as a merchant, emphasizing the perils of the sea and the shortness of the sailing season. Don't ever become a merchant, says Hesiod. Among such brotherly advice came the stories of Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods, and Pandora's box. Maybe you recognize those. Scholars see this work as the time of agrarian crisis in mainland Greece that would start a wave of colonization across the Mediterranean world. Despite Hesiod's complaints about poverty, life on the farm cannot have been too uncomfortable. In the poem, the farmer employs a friend, servants, a plowman of mature years, a slave boy, and a female servant. There are 2 versions as to where Hesiod is reputedly to be buried. Thucydides stated that the Delphic oracle warned Hesiod that he would die in Nemea. Hesiod fled to Locris, where he was killed at the local temple to Nemean Zeus, and subsequently buried there. The other version, according to Aristotle's Constitution of Orchomenus, stated that when the Thespians ravaged Ascra, the villagers sought refuge at Orchomenus, where they collected the ashes of Hesiod and placed them in the agora next to the tomb of Minyas, their founder. In China, in 698 BC, Chusi I, the ninth ruler of the state of Qin, was assassinated by Sanfu and Fuji, who put the crown prince Duke Wu on the throne of Qin. In the first year of his reign, Wu attacked the Pengqi tribe of the Rong people, advancing east to Mount Hua. Further attacks on the Rong people, remember the Rong people, we talked about them before, occurred in 688 and 687 BC, whereby Wu established the counties of Gui, Ji, Du, and Zheng in former Rong territories to the east of Qin. As for Sanfu and Fuji, the assassins of Chuzi I, they would meet their ends at the hands of the person they helped to the throne. Duke Wu would rule for 20 years and be succeeded by Duke De in 678 BC. But there are more than one state in China. Meanwhile, in the state of Qi, so you have the state of Qi and the state of Qin. That's great. That's it. Just one letter differentiating them. But meanwhile, in the state of Qi, Duke Xi was succeeded by son Qiang in 698 BC. Qiang had an incestuous relationship with his younger half-sister Wen Jiang, who had married Duke Huan of Lu in 709 BC. Do you follow? We have the incestuous brother and sister. The sister is married to another duke, the Duke of Lu. So that's what's going on. And Qiang is taking over the throne of Qi. In 694 BC, Duke Huan visited Qi with his wife. That is the half-sister. Bad move, as this enabled Qiang to continue his affair with his half-sister Wen Jiang. But Huan found out the affair, and when he did, Qiang ordered his half-brother, there is another sibling, Prince Pengcheng, to murder Huan in his carriage after he got drunk. I'm not sure who got drunk. Probably Huan. The people of Lu were incensed, but they couldn't do anything about it, as Qi was much more powerful. However, to calm the people of Lu, Qiang decided to execute Pengcheng, his own brother, as a scapegoat. What a jerk! Oh, it continues. Following Huan's death, Wen Jiang stayed in the state of Qi, continuing her relationship with her brother Qiang. This is dirty stuff. In 693 BC, Qiang married Wang Ji, a daughter of King Xuan of Zhou. The king of Zhou. The Zhous are still the kings, remember that. But she died a year later. Qi then went to war against the state of Ji, taking the cities of Ping, Qi, and Wu. In 691 BC, a younger brother of the Marquis of Ji defected to Qi. The Marquis of Ji fled in haste a year later, not even giving his wife a proper burial, and subsequently giving up the state to his treasonous younger brother. Qi was now in control of Lu. However, Duke Qiang did the proper thing and gave the princess of Lu a proper burial. Duke Qiang met his end in 686 BC at the hands of his cousin Wuxi. Wuxi had been a favorite nephew of Duke Xi, but was passed over in succession in favor of Qiang, being demoted to the status of Wuxi. So that's not only his name, but also a status. That's weird. Qiang had injured his foot in a hunting trip, which gave Wuxi the opportunity to kill the duke in his palace, with the aids of General Lian Cheng and Guan Sifu, both of them being mistreated by Qiang. In 697 BC, King Huan of Zhou was succeeded by his son Zhuang of Zhou. He became the 15th ruler of the Zhou dynasty and the 3rd ruler of Eastern Zhou. He ruled from 697 to 682 BC. Sadly, little is known about this ruler, apart from the fact that his daughter Wang Ji married Duke Qiang of Qi in 693 BC, as I did just mention. The Cimmerians, remember the Cimmerians, they are out and about, and in 696 BC, the Cimmerians launched an attack on Phrygia in eastern Anatolia. The Cimmerians were known from several Assyrian texts, which called them Gamir or Gemira, the last meaning the people traveling back and forth. They were closely related to the Scythians, who may have expelled them from their home country. We talked about all of this in the show. Originally, the Cimmerians lived in southern Ukraine, where archaeologists have identified them with the Novosyrkask culture on the plains between the river Prut. That word actually means fart in Swedish. The river Prut and the lower Don between 900 and 650 BC. Men were buried with bows, swords and spears, with evidence suggesting that they fought as mounted archers. Their most precious possessions were cows. In the 8th century BC, many Cimmerians moved southeast to the region north of the Caucasus. They started to threaten the kingdom of Urartu, whereby King Rusa I decided to go on the attack in 720 BC. But remember what happened to King Rusa. Sargon happened to him. And with Rusa defeated, the Cimmerians invaded Urartu, looting the country as far south as Lake Urmia, but Urartu lives. News reached Phrygia in Anatolia of the advancement of the Cimmerians. 710-709, Midas asked for help from the Assyrian king Sargon II, as you have heard. But this only delayed the inevitable end, and in 696 BC the Cimmerians arrived at the capital of Gordium, which was sacked and destroyed, forcing Midas to commit suicide by drinking bull's blood. Why do you die when you drink bull's blood? I don't know. Somebody tell me. A horrible way to go, anyway. Cimmerians started to settle on the Phrygian plain that was suited to their cavalry, which would be bad news for the emerging Lydian kingdom situated in western Anatolia. And there we have it for the 690s BC. Next time, we will see what happens to the city of Babylon when Sennacherib returns with a vengeance. We will see Judah's monotheistic reforms under Hezekiah undone by his successors, and Egypt will enter the story again when a Cushite ruler comes to challenge the might of Assyria. If you want to get hold of Sarak, you can catch him on Twitter. He is the guy writing these scripts and doing the research now that I cannot do it. You can also catch his YouTube channel, Sarak002, which is dedicated to PlayStation 4 gaming walkthroughs. Please also like and subscribe to the Fan of History YouTube channel, where you can catch up with the previous event series and the podcast covering 1000 to 701 BC. But for now, it's time to say goodbye from Sarak of Timeline of World History and me, Dan, the Fan of History. Until next time, enjoy your history and goodbye.